Hi guys, my name is Bobby. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you my March wrap up. In March, I read 3 books, which isn't bad, but isn't great either. It really bothered me that I only read 3. I slumped pretty bad after reading Silver Flames in February, and so it was hard to kind of get my reading going. And towards the end of the month, it was bad. So I only have 3 to talk about, and hey, it's better than reading none at all, right? So the first first book I read is the 3rd book in the Fae Chronicles series, and I can't remember what it's called. It's on the screen. By Amelia. So I'm a bad booktuber. Can't remember. It's been over a month since I've read it, and it's book 3 in the series. Or is it 2? No, it's book 2. I'm saying book 3. Like, I don't even know how to book 2. Why am I even here? Book 2, not book 3. I read book 2, Tempting Destiny by Amelia Hutchins. There we go. I get a gold star. It's book 2 in the series. I gave it 4 stars. It was an improvement on the first one. More shit happens in the plot. The series is really good. The smut is really good and very heavy-handed in the smut department, which is fine. Like, it doesn't bother me. To me, it's kind of campy. Becca read book 1 and she didn't like it, but for me, it's kind of like the camp, like the way they feed is by having sex. I mean, it's pretty much just an excuse to add more smut in your book, and I find it funny. I do like the world, and they are now in Fae, and like all the stuff that's going on, and Sin is figuring out more stuff about her heritage and where she came from, and I have really been enjoying that. But I'm also halfway through book 3, and I put it down. I was reading book 3 in March, and I put it down. I haven't picked it up in weeks, so I'm really confused on if what I'm saying is book 2 or book 3, because it all kind of meshes together. And I think the reason I put book 3 down was because as I bought book 3, started reading it, I also bought book 4. And then I was reading some reviews and heard that after you read book 4, you can't read books 5, 6, and 7 in the Fae Chronicles. In order to understand what's going on in those books, you have to read at least the first 2 books and 2 other shoot-off series from this main one that follow characters that are in the main series. And that kind of pissed me off. Like, I just want to be able to read a series straight through. I don't want to have to read a couple other series off of the main one in order to get the full scope and able to finish the main series. It kind of defeats the purpose. So I got kind of pissed. So I stopped reading book 3, even though book 3 is really good. Like, there was nothing wrong with it. I was enjoying it. The world is opening up a lot more. You've discovered a whole lot more stuff. It's very interesting. But I got bored and I got really pissed. So I stopped reading it. But book 2 was 4 stars. It was good. I would encourage you to read the series if you like fantasy romance that's really heavy on the smut, and that, I mean, I think the world is fun. Becca didn't like it as much. She didn't like the covers. I don't really give a shit about the covers. Mine are all ebooks, so they're not going on a shelf, so it doesn't bother me. But I really enjoy the banter between the 2 main characters, and I think it's fun. I think it's a fun series, so I will continue reading it. I have just taken a hiatus from it for the moment. Okay, next I guess I'll just talk about the other fantasy romance I read. I was the only book that I read during Becca's Bookopoly-thon, and that's The Longing of Lone Wolves by Lana, and not going to butcher her last name. This was a gift from Ash the Book Sloth. Or no, I always say from Ash the Book Sloth, but I don't think she doesn't have a channel or anything like that. She's just in Becca's Discord. And because her name sounds like it should be a Bookstagram or a YouTube channel, and she doesn't have one. This is a gift from Ash. She bought it for me to try to help me get out of my slump, and I read it. This is the only book I read during Bookopoly-thon, and it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. So this is a Fae and wolf shifter fantasy romance. This is a post-apocalyptic fantasy romance. This takes place after a nuclear apocalypse on Earth, to where almost all of humans have been wiped out, and now we have all sorts of different kinds of Fae creatures. So you have regular Fae, you have wolf shifters, you have vampires, you have stuff like that. And from the way it was described, what happened in the nuclear holocaust, pretty much, that's how humans survived. They evolved into these, paranormal creatures. There are still humans, but they live in a separate city, like over here, and they're walled off. And, all the Fae people who live out in the nicer parts that they've rebuilt in the world that have forests and stuff like that, they stay away from the humans. We follow our main character. What is her name? I can't remember. Clark. Clark wakes up in the middle and half in a lake, half out of the lake, out of nowhere. She's been frozen under ice for over 1,000 years, I think, or was it 2,000 years? Something ridiculous. Since right before the apocalypse. So what she remembers is living in Las Vegas, and she's a seer, so she can, see the future a little bit, and like she could pick lottery numbers, she can pick races, like, because she can see what the winners are going to be. And she was being used by this really nasty overlord kind of guy to, do bad things pretty much. And so she didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And her waking up on this side of in the lake, half an hour of the lake, she was like, oh my God, where am I? But also great. And then comes to realize really fast that something's not quite right. And she is in the future and all this stuff. She gets some Fae find her and they want to torture and kill her because they hate humans. And she sees this one lone Fae out by himself and he rescues her. And she can see clearly within the first like 10 or 15 minutes of being around him, nobody else can see him, but she can. Which what is his name? Why can't I think of his name? It's like how long? Rush, duh. Rush is the name of this Fae, and he is a wolf shifter Fae. They're all Fae, so he's a wolf shifter Fae. And Rush is invisible because he has a curse put on him to where it was a punishment, and nobody can see him or hear him or anything. So it's a very lonely existence. He just wanders around and nobody can see or hear him, and it's really sad. Even if he tries to communicate with somebody else, like leave a letter or a note or something, the curse recognizes it and will destroy it. So it's really sad. And so to come across this, human female or whatever, and she can see him and talk to him and hear him, it's very weird for Rush, and he's been alone for so long. And so they kind of go on this journey together to figure out, how can she see him, for one? What's going on in the world? Because there's other Fae creatures that are dying mysteriously. So it kind of goes into this big, huge world building, but it was really, really, really good. I really enjoyed it. The world building is great. This is a little bit lower on the smut. The first smut scene doesn't happen until towards the end of the book. It's a lot of, staring at each other lustfully and all that. Like there's a huge build up to the first smut scene, and it's towards the end, and it's not as graphic as like the Fae Chronicles and other books. So if you're not really into all the heavy smut, this one doesn't have as much. I have book 2 on my Kindle. I just haven't picked it up yet. And book 2 follows Rush's son. So I'm excited to read it. Thank you, Ash, for recommending it. It was very good. And it was a different take on a post-apocalyptic kind of fantasy romance too. Cause I read like the Four Horsemen series. I'm still waiting on book 4, but I read that one and really enjoyed that series. So this is a good post-apocalyptic where it's not, I don't know, there's no zombies, there's nothing crazy, but I liked the way that it went and how the world is starting to rebuild itself. So I highly recommend it if you like fantasy romance, but you're not super heavy into the smut and kind of like the world building and what life would be like if something like this happened. Okay, the last book that I read out of the 3 books is a book that actually Buddy read with Vicky. Like we didn't have anything for this month for our book club. We didn't have anything like that for March, but I said that I wanted to read this book, and her and I were just chatting, and she said, well, she's like, I'll Buddy read it with you when, but I have to get a copy. So I bought her a copy for her birthday, and we read it together. And I'm really glad I did. And this was a gift from Jess, I believe. Yes, this is a gift from Jess for Christmas. And I read Me by Elton John. So this is Elton John's autobiography. I Buddy read it with Vicky, and I'm so glad I did because it was such a fun experience. So I've watched the movie Rocket Man, which is kind of like the Bohemian Rhapsody, where it is the story of Queen. Rocket Man is the story of Elton John. It was really good. And I watched that before I read this, and he mentions it in here, but I think it did a very honest depiction of his life and how things went. I gave this 4 stars. Vicky did too, I believe. I wanted to give it 5 because I really enjoyed it, but there was something about the way he wrote it that I didn't jive with, and I just couldn't give it the 5 stars. So this is 100% in Elton John's words. It starts out from birth all the way until, when was this published? 2019, 2018, something like that. So it goes right up to when he retires. Okay, 2019. So right when he retires from touring. And it was very interesting learning about his life and how it started out, how he was not very close with his dad, his very toxic relationship with his mother, and him growing up in, 60s, the UK, and all the crazy stuff they used to do, how he met Bernie Taupin, who is his songwriter. So Elton John is, he's the singer and he plays the piano. but his song lyrics are written by his best friend Bernie, and they met in the late 60s. And because Elton had always said that he was really shitty at writing song lyrics, like he could never write any that were good or sounded right, but he can play by ear. So he went in for an audition at this random record company. The guy didn't like him, and so as he's leaving, he's like, here, just look at these. And he had a stack of just shit, handed him like this envelope that had Bernie's lyrics that he'd written. He was trying to be a songwriter, you know, songwriting for other people. Handed him to Elton. Elton loved him, got a hold of him, and like it just kind of went from there, and history was made. Like, if that random little small thing, if that record producer guy hadn't just thrown this random thing at Elton, been like, here you go, you know, as he was leaving, kind of like a consolation prize, they would have never hooked up. Him and Bernie would have never hooked up, and Elton John, as we know, would not have existed. So it was interesting listening to him talk about all the different songs and the different albums that he's written and done, and how it was always something going on in his life. And with, you know, and Bernie would write about it, whether it was about Elton or about himself. And then they never wrote together. Bernie would write the lyrics, hand them to Elton, and would leave. And Elton would sit there and watch and read them. And then a tune would just pop in his head, and he'd just start playing and just would write the music to it. And it's so good. It was so cool reading about how organic they were and how much of a musical genius Elton John is, and his quirks and all the weird things. And that's one of the things that I really loved about this, is he is so open and honest. He's very self-deprecating. He talks very in depth about his drug addiction to cocaine that lasted like 20 years. Most of the 70s and the 80s he was on coke constantly, and the crazy shit he used to do. It talks a lot about his sexuality and how he realized he was gay, which took forever for him to realize. And that the fact that he was such a late blossomer when it came to his sexuality probably saved his life and made it so that he didn't get AIDS, because a lot of his friends have died from AIDS. It's just all the people that he's met through his life and how starstruck he gets, like talking about his really good friendship with John Lennon, and meeting like Elvis for the first time. And even though he was meeting Elvis towards the end of his life, and how starstruck he was just meeting people. Even though he was a star, he didn't feel that way. He still felt like a little kid meeting his icons. And it was just cool hearing him talk about the different relationships he had and the different famous people he was friends with. And that after he got sober, he is a sponsor for a lot of famous people. Like, he's Eminem's sponsor. So, you know, if Eminem is having a hard time, he calls that Elton John and be like, tell me not to use. Like, it's just cool stuff like that. He talks about rehab. He talks about meeting his husband and their journey to have kids. It was so good. The thing I didn't like about the writing style is that Elton, and he says it too, he's very detail oriented. He likes to know facts. And so like he would collect charts, like record charts, and track where everything was of his own music. And before he became famous, even when he was little, he just had, you know, pages and pages of the records and the charts and like where they all charted and stuff like that. So he's very, very detail oriented, and he's very honest about that. And he's detail oriented about a lot of things in his life. He's like that in the writing too. So he would be talking about going to a studio to, you know, do an album. Like, okay, we're going to go record Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And he would talk about going there, but he's got to mention every single person who was involved, first and last name, how he met them. And it was, even if they're only there for that one thing. And for me, I found it very confusing because they're just a blip on his radar. I don't really care to know every single detail about every single thing like that. I want to know about the people who are important in your life and how they, you know, got you to where you wanted to be, or the good friendships that you had. Somebody who worked on one song on one album, I don't need their whole backstory. So that kind of like, it was just kind of bogged it down. I also wanted to hear more. I got kind of disappointed. I wanted to hear more of the backstory of certain songs. And he kind of did talk about some of them, but not as much as I wanted to. Like, I wanted to hear more. And I know Bernie wrote them, but even still, I know some of the songs that Bernie wrote were about Elton's cocaine addiction. Like, which ones were that? There was some where he talked about more in depth, but there was other ones that I wanted to know more about and why they were written. And we didn't get all of that. But I did love hearing about his personal life and, you know, the way things were handled. And it was just a fantastic book. If you like Elton John at all, I highly suggest you read it. Thank you again so much, Jess, for this gift. I'm super glad you got it for me, and I'm really glad I got to read it. And it was great reading it with Vicky because, I mean, as I was reading this book, I had my Elton John playlist going, which kind of just added to the ambiance. It was pretty fun, but I love celebrity autobiographies. If I really like the celebrity and care about their work, especially music ones. Music ones are more fun. I've read Elton John's Cher. I read Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Gene Wilder's autobiographies. So like I'm always on the lookout for autobiographies for people that I'm really interested in or find fascinating. So glad I read this one. Elton John is one of my favorites. I highly suggest you pick it up if you like his music at all. Okay, guys, that's it. That is my March wrap up. It is very short because I only read 3 books. One of them I couldn't really talk about because it's a sequel, and that's it. Hopefully I can get more read. I have a very small TBR for April, making good progress on Crescent City, about halfway through. So see how this goes. Please let me know in the comments down below what you read in March. I'd like to hear what you guys had to read because, you know, only 3 books over here. But that's it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.